The US House of Representatives is meeting to vote on another tranche of bailout funds as a further 4.4 million Americans lost their jobs. Well, the latest unemployment numbers are pretty stark. New applications for unemployment benefits mean the total number of people who have lost their jobs since mid-March is now 26.4 million. That is around 15% of the US workforce. And this graph shows the huge spikes in unemployment, which happened extremely quickly as those lockdown measures brought the world's biggest economy to a standstill. And this is a graph from the Economic Policy Institute. It shows us the unemployment claims over the past 50 years. And the areas, those polls that you can see in grey, they indicate a recession. And basically what this graph tells us is that the jobless claims of the last 5 weeks are in fact more than 5 times worse than the 5-week period of the Great Recession. So really putting it into context. This is really hard to comprehend figures of this size. So let's get some context from the economist Elise Gould. She tweeted that how do we even understand a number like 24 million? It's as if the entire adult population of Texas and Oklahoma combined applied for unemployment insurance benefits in the last 5 weeks. Extraordinary figures. Well, to explain how quickly individuals will be able to access the financial aid, here's Heidi Shear-Holes, a former chief economist at the Department of Labor.
Our unemployment insurance program is actually administered at the state level. So there's more than 50 of these programs, and they have varying degrees of being ready to accommodate a crisis of this magnitude. So what we're seeing is, in many cases, people are getting frozen out. They're having to face long delays, which is a real problem. I hope the U.S. really learns the lesson that we need to invest more in these programs so that we're ready when a crisis like this hits, because this is the lifeline for working people who have lost their jobs through no fault of their own, through a global pandemic. And so we really, it is a shame, I think, the fact that we've underinvested in these systems in recent decades. It's working people right now who are paying the price.
And it's working people, especially people who work in, say, the services industries, those people who serve food, for example, people who earn such a large amount of their salary through tips, that will be hugely affected.
Yeah, so the industries that we're seeing being hit hardest right in the beginning of this crisis are those frontline service industries where there's a lot of social interactions that have been really shut down. So you're talking restaurants, hospitality industries, hotels, tourism, anything related to events. Brick and mortar retail has been hit really hard. So one of the underlying things about all those is many of those jobs are very low wage jobs. So you're seeing people seeing their jobs disappear who before that didn't have high enough wages in order to have a cushion built up. So people really are in dire straits and desperately need government relief at this point.
So the House of Representatives is meeting to approve the latest relief package. It's worth $484 billion. It's nearly 2/3 of it is being earmarked to help small businesses cope during the pandemic. Let's get Katty Kay's perspective on this. She joins us live. And that is really needed because we saw just within 2 weeks the money spent completely on the small business relief fund. So the money is desperately, desperately needed.
Yeah, so you showed those charts showing the unemployment, and it's really been the last 5 weeks, hasn't it, Kasia, that we've seen this huge spike week on week of millions of Americans losing their jobs. Now, if you think about it, that money that was destined for small businesses, all of that in the first round of stimulus went in 2 weeks. So for 5 weeks, some Americans have not been getting any money at all. They can't pay their employees, they can't pay their rent, they can't keep their businesses going. So they're looking to this new tranche that the House of Representatives is about to vote on, $484 billion in a new stimulus program, $60 billion of that reserved specifically for the smallest businesses in the country, because what happened last time around is that some of the money actually went to bigger businesses who could actually go to a bank, who had the resources to go to a bank and get loans of other sorts. And there's been a lot of controversy here about that. Were the most needy really getting the money? So Congress has tried this time around to do a better job of earmarking some of this money specifically for small businesses. It'll go through Congress, and in the times we are in, even the voting for it is going to be different, because usually this would be a 15-minute vote. All of the 435 members of the House of Representatives would come in, cast their ballots, it would be done. This time around, only 60 members of Congress at any one time can be in the chamber. And afterwards, there has to be a disinfecting process. The whole thing's going to take about 2 hours. But we do expect the House of Representatives to vote on this later this afternoon.
Yes, of course, we'll update our viewers as and when that does come in finally. Stay right there, Catty, because I also want to touch on another story coming out of the US. It involves President Trump. Now, we've heard Donald Trump repeatedly promise to reopen the economy in weeks, not months, even as coronavirus deaths continue to mount. So perhaps it might be surprising to hear his message for Georgia's governor, who has started to lift lockdown restrictions.
They can wait a little bit longer, just a little bit, not much, because safety has to predominate. We have to have that. So I told the governor very simply that I disagree with his decision, but he has to do what he thinks is right.
So as you can hear, a rather different tone to what we've heard previously from the president. Well, Georgia's Republican Governor Brian Kemp hit back on Twitter, tweeting, "I appreciate the president's bold leadership and insight during these difficult times. Our next measured step is driven by data and guided by state public health officials. We'll continue with this approach to protect the lives and livelihoods of all Georgians." Well, Georgia's move is the most aggressive of the states. From Friday, nail salons, massage parlours, even bowling alleys and gyms can reopen, while in-dining restaurants will be reopened on Monday. So, Catty, we can see that it will be helpful, of course, for the economy of Georgia, but it just goes to show what a difference across different states the whole lockdown process has been.
Yeah, I mean, the data that Governor Kemp is referring to is data suggesting that Georgia hit its peak a couple of weeks ago in terms of the number of coronavirus cases. And so he feels that he can take these measures in order to try to reopen the economy, bearing in mind how many people have lost their jobs. But we're already hearing business owners from Georgia, owners of gyms, for example, saying they're not even going to bother reopening because they don't think it's safe, and because polls show that the public doesn't think it's safe. And so will they actually go back, even if a nail salon is opened in Atlanta, Georgia? Is somebody going to think that they can go there in a socially distanced way and get their pedicure or their manicure? It doesn't seem so. So is it worth these businesses reopening? You're right, it points to the patchwork nature of this. And yes, some states have much fewer cases, for example, than New York or Washington, D.C., where I am. And so the feeling is that they can start to reopen slowly. There's some concern that people can move between states, and so could they carry the virus with them from one state that is shut down to another that is starting to open up. But it is part of the American system. And I think this coronavirus incident, the whole pandemic, has revealed some of the weaknesses in the system where things are patchwork in this way.
Very complicated situation, extremely interesting to hear it outlined by you, Catty. As always, thank you so much for talking us through it. My colleague Catty Kay there live from Washington.